Today on Shredding Spree, we're doing manuals. Everyone loves a good manual. It's a skill that takes a long time to learn, but once you get it on lock, it's a guaranteed crowd pleaser every time. For those of you that might be watching this that aren't bike riders, a manual is a wheelie without pedaling. So you find the balance point on the bike and you keep the front wheel up by weight distribution versus acceleration on the pedals. Personally, I learned how to manual as a teenager on a BMX bike. I remember just going back and forth in front of my parents' house for hours, pulling up on the handlebars and seeing how long I can keep the front wheel up. I eventually got it figured out, and I got to the point where I could hold a manual until I basically ran out of momentum. Great times. But after a long hiatus from bike riding in my 20s, I sort of lost the skill and it had to be relearned on these big mountain bikes I was now riding. It took a lot of practice for me to learn it again, but I eventually got it back. I wouldn't call myself a master of the manual, but I can get some pretty sweet action going. Having said that, I still have days where I just don't have it and I can't hold it up for very long. I find that the more often I've been riding my bike in recent history, the better my manuals are, which is kind of obvious to say. This isn't going to be another manual tutorial video because I feel like there's plenty of those out there. I'm not much of a mechanical learner anyways. I sort of learn things based on feel, so I feel like there's a pretty good chance I would leave out some important details if I did try to teach you anything. So what's the purpose of this manual video? Just to show off? Kinda? Nah. The real reason is, last Monday, I posted a video of myself doing a manual on my hardtail somewhere online, and someone commented,
"Manualing a hardtail? That's cheating. Cheating."
Cheater.
They didn't really say it like that, and I actually cropped off the end of the comment to make him look like more of a jerk. Sorry, man. But this did actually get me thinking. Is it more difficult to manual on a full suspension bike versus a hardtail? I think maybe.
Whoa, I never thought of that.
There's a lot of factors that go into the geometry of a bike that make it more difficult or easier to manual or wheelie. Length of the chainstays, the length of the reach, how far ahead of you the handlebars are, the rake, everything kind of comes into play. My theory is, once you've found the balance point on a bike, you can find it on any other bike. Takes a little getting used to, but I think you got it. But when we're talking about manualing a hardtail versus a full suspension bike, there's one obvious key component that really affects the way you're able to hold a manual, and that's the rear shock, or lack thereof. When you're at your balance point while doing a manual, there's a few things you do to adjust the height of the front wheel to keep the thing going. If your front end starts to come too high, you squeeze that brake a little bit and it comes back down. But if it starts to go back down low, you have to swing your hips back to shift your weight and get that front wheel back up. You move your hips in and out, in and out, to hold up the manual. Sometimes it actually takes quite a kick to keep that front wheel up. Now, when we're talking about hardtail versus full suspension, when we make that kicking motion and drive our weight back to hold the front wheel up, on a hardtail, that force gets transferred directly to the rear axle, causing the front end to come up, I think, a little easier. On a full suspension bike, it's going to absorb that motion a little bit, which could be where the big difference is. Now, having said all that, I actually feel like when you manual a full suspension bike, it sort of seems to set into its balance point a little bit better. I think the hardtail sort of requires a little bit more modulating to hold the balance point, whereas the full suspension bike really sort of locks into that balance point and requires a little less adjustment on the fly. So how do we settle this argument? I'm no scientist or engineer, but I have come up with a non-scientific way we can figure out once and for all which bike is harder to manual. So we came out here to this section of road that's perfect for practicing manuals. It's pretty straight, it's a little bit downhill, and it's closed to cars. I brought both of my bikes out here and I'm gonna do 10 manuals on each bike. Then we'll review the footage and add up the total amount of time that I spent manualing on each bike. Then we'll find out if it is in fact cheating to manual on a hardtail. Doing swing it into the wind, it's a little hard to keep it straight. We'll get it though, we'll get some good ones. So that was one. I cheated on that one. We're gonna have to cut that one short because it started coming down. A gust of wind hit me and I started pedaling to keep it back up again. So I don't know what the rules are on that. Who made the rules anyway?
Not me.
Not good. So that was 5, and that was a bad one. Well, these are 10 honest tries. We're not doing redos here, so. Oh! See, 10 tries flies by. I feel like I'm getting warmed up now. This is cheating! Alright, there's 10 tries on the hardtail for the manual. I don't feel like any of them were particular, well, one of them I think was pretty good. The rest of them, kind of weak. So we'll see what happens here. I'm running the shock open, because we're not cheating here. So the shock is open, the bike is in full squish mode. Let's see how we can set into this manual. No warm-ups either on this bike. Let's see how she goes. Got to pull up a little harder. So much more comfortable for me right now. I've been riding this bike so much more, which is kind of why I wanted to start on the hardtail, because I wanted to acclimate to that before getting onto this. But I feel like I'm used to the wider handlebars now. It was a little easier to keep it straight. But also, like I said earlier, with the linkage, I feel like it kind of sets into that balance point a little bit and it just stays there. So I feel like I'm making less adjustments, less of that hip movement. Still going, still going. Had to stop from the gate. And this is not the outcome I was expecting, so I'm kind of wondering about my methods here. We need to warm up more next time. We need to redo this experiment because this thing is just blowing the hardtail away so far. This thing manuals itself. I'm not out here to offend any of you hardtail guys. Hey, that should have been 9. One more manual. This is going to be the best one. I'm going to set the world record. Let's look up what the world record is right now.
Wait, I disagree with the test. I challenge him now that he's warmed up to get back on the hardtail and see just one, if there's any difference.
Challenge accepted. So just for bonus points, I got back on the hardtail here. We're going back up the hill. Now that I'm warmed up, I'm gonna do like 2 or 3 just right up here before we get going to get the feel for the length of the bike and the brakes again. But I feel like this is fair. Try to do this again now that I've been riding for 30 minutes. I don't have time to redo it, but one thing I do notice for sure is this bike wants to loop out a lot easier. So I'm trimming with the brake a ton and I almost come to a complete stop, but I'm still holding it up. So I don't know, we'll have to do it again. If you think my test is BS, let us know in the comments. So here we are a day later. I've gone through the footage, I've tallied the numbers. Let's take a look and see what the hell actually happened out there. On the hardtail, we put in a solid effort and ended up with a total time of 78.91 seconds for an average manual of 7.89 seconds. But then on the fully suspended bike, we got a total of 84.36 seconds, which calculates to a winning average of 8.43 seconds per manual. Now I gotta be honest with you guys, these are not the results I was expecting when I decided to do this test. I thought 100% sure that I'd be able to manual farther on the hardtail than I would with the full suspension bike. But while doing the test, it felt like the full suspension bike was blowing away the hardtail. When I factor in all of the outside variables like the wind, getting used to following the golf cart we were filming from, the fact that I started manualing on the hardtail when I was cold and hadn't been riding that day, and then the bottom line is that I haven't been riding that hardtail much at all lately anyway. It becomes pretty obvious that I put the hardtail at a bit of a disadvantage in this test. In fact, when I went back to the hardtail after doing my 10 manuals on the full suspension, that one manual brought the hardtail's average up to 8.28 seconds, which is only a quarter of a second less than what it was on the full suspension bike, which to me is basically a tie. Now, having considered all of that, when I was doing the manuals on the full suspension bike, I actually ran out of room on the road we were shooting on a couple of times, and I feel like I could have gone even further. So basically what I'm getting at is that my test is massively flawed and there's no way NASA will ever accept my findings as non-refutable. But my biggest takeaway from all of this is that if you can manual, you can manual. And manualing on a hardtail definitely isn't cheating. I mean, we all know there's only one cheater in the mountain bike community, and that's e-bikers. Whoa, 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 whoa. Chill out, e-bikers are fine. So that's where I'll close this one out. If you aren't too angry about my non-findings from this experiment, consider liking and subscribing. It'll really help me convince my wife that making these videos isn't a total waste of time. But until the next one, thanks for geeking out on bikes with me.
Manualing a hardtail is cheating. Manual a hard... Man, you can't do that. Manualing a hardtail? I'm cheating.
Cheater! Okay. Oh, this is easy. Oh, thank you. Oh yeah, this is way easier. Oh, thank you. Oh.
I give that one credit.